Good morning and welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television International, your winning station, where we keep you up to date with what is happening from our Nigerian newspaper. And as you know, today is the International World Malaria Day, and it's very important that we keep you up to date with what is happening, statistics of malaria, where Nigeria is presently, and also how we can collectively fight this disease called malaria. I am Sarah Elisha Dasherman. Rachel, as usual, is my co-host. Good morning, Rachel.
Sarah.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm fine. You know, before we go to the papers, I just want us to talk a little about malaria. You know, it's I think it's an illness that has actually taken lots of lives.
It has.
In fact, from the statistics the World Health Organization gave for last year, I mean, looking at globally, Nigeria has about 8.4% global cases. I know most of the cases we have are in Africa, and maybe because of our region, the way it's waterlogged and all of that, and so it's kind of a good place to breed, you know, mosquitoes, and then before we realize that malaria is there. And then the World Health Organization felt it's very important that we bring to light this thing, even though for every date has been set aside for us to, it's either we are looking at cancer or we're looking at education. I think on Saturday was when we look at the World Earth Day, which we talked a little about yesterday, how we can contribute to making sure the earth is a safe place. And then today we are looking at the internet. It's important that we know, because the theme for this year is possibly investing in zero malaria, making sure we innovate, we invest, and seeing what we can all do, just like I said, collectively to fight malaria. I think this disease, even though back then was called, I think malaria was known like, I think was it a black man disease or something like that, and then mostly it's kind of a way that killed white people back then, and then all of that. But then exactly, so I just think it's important, even though I think mostly we see ministries, especially the health ministry, various NGO, especially it's only when during those days we see awareness being made. But I think we shouldn't just make it to be just on this particular day when the world is actually you know, celebrating the World Malaria Day. There's pregnant women sleeping under mosquito net, make this to like to
malaria is in our environment, and I feel apart from the medications we have there and whatever medicine have to offer to us, I believe it begins with our environment. And I know we're in Africa and we are in Nigeria, but trust me, there are areas even in the same region that you will find out that there are more mosquitoes than other areas. Like you could say when you're in this side of Jos, there is more mosquitoes than the other side of Jos. And the truth is that when you go to all those areas, even the cleanliness of those areas always differ. You find out that all these gutters are not existing in the areas that have less mosquitoes and all of that, and those that are struggling with a lot of mosquitoes have a lot of drainages and waters that mosquitoes can find it easy to grow and all of that. So I believe that with or without help from the government, from international bodies, from everybody, one of the fastest and the easiest way for us to curb the issue of malaria, that it becomes minimal, is starting with our environment. And it simply means keeping it clean, making it impossible or almost impossible, or just bringing down the risks of, I believe people know how deadly it is already. Thousands of lives have been lost to it, but then we talk about how to keep your environment clean and safe, that you have less mosquitoes around you, and in that case you wouldn't have to deal with mosquito.
Leave this to the government or NGOs. But then what can you do? What can I do to make sure that, because it's actually time to deliver zero malaria? Well, let's go straight to our papers. Remember, we're live on Facebook and also on YouTube. You can actually drop your comment there on our Facebook or YouTube page. And then also later on the show, we will open the phone line so that you can actually, you know, contribute collectively to what is actually happening. And let us go through the papers, starting with the first news, which I'll be taking us through the first newspaper. And we have the big caption on the first news that says, ahead May 29 inauguration, Tinubu returns from abroad, says, I'm strong, I'm ready for work. Dismisses rumor, dismisses rumored I will health. And then he said, assure Nigerians I have tested, refreshed, very strong, set for tax ahead. Received at Abuja Airport, Asokoro resident by jubilant supporters. You can actually see the picture story in his blue agbada. And there are other stories here. We have ex-FUNAP DVC Prof. Lateef assumes duty today as the NSPRI CD CEO. You can find more of that story inside the paper. Like Buhari, Ganduji, Taraba governor begs Nigerians for forgiveness. And I hope we grow from just asking for forgiveness. You should grow to that point that you don't have to ask for forgiveness if you know you've actually done something to Nigerians.
Or the table can be turned around, say, well, we are the ones saying sorry for thinking you will not perform. Nigerians are the ones saying sorry for thinking you couldn't perform before because you did a good job. And we don't want you saying you had 8 years to do something well. Why would after 8 years what you're leaving for us is please forgive me? It means you had this much time and you kind of didn't do anything with it. So we don't want to hear forgive me. We just want to hear you
just perform your
do your
duty,
job. Yes.
Well, other stories still on First News. We have petrol price increases by 42.6. Find more of that story inside the paper. Snoring increases risks of heart attack and stroke. This is coming from experts. So in case you're suffering from that, it's good you check. You go to the hospital for a checkup to check what the problem is to avoid that. Other stories here. We have Tinubu Transition Committee on meeting Igbo dangerous, coming from Ohanize, as the Southeast youth give condition to forgive President Buhari. And on the issue of Sultan, Air Peace offers to evacuate stranded Nigerian injured Lagos accident victim found with 100 used baby diapers. Well, that's really, really sad. Thank God that he was actually, caught, and I hope that he faced, even though it's really sad, we find things like this happening. Another story here, we have gunmen adopt NPC commissioner demand 5 million naira ransom, and that's all on the First newspaper.
On New National Star, IPOB condemns killing of 5 policemen, 2 civilians in Imo. You can find the details on page 11. Atedola hires individual shares in Transcorp. 2 feared killed, 5 injured in Abuja ethnic clash. Air Peace pledges free evacuation of Nigerians trapped in Sudan. The details can be found on page 15. And the big story on National Star, police probe Rex role in Guba poll. This is on Adamawa. Vow to unravel unwholesome conduct of Yunusa Ari and other collaborators. The details can be found on page 8. 37% of Nigerians lose money to digital payment threats. Petrol price increased by 42.63% per litre in 1 year. This is a report coming from the MBS. Court quashes Nigeria heirs' hope of flying. Outrage condemnation trail mother of Benue Labour Party chairman. The details can be found on page 10. I'm ready for tax ahead. A statement coming from Tinubu. You can find the details on page 18. Sit at home. Normalcy returns to business activities in Anambra. The details can be found on page 11. And we have a picture story where we can see the president-elect returning to Nigeria. And that's all the news on National Star.
On this day newspaper, 2022 FYE, 5 big banks stand firm despite economic headwinds, with the rider whole combined total asset of 58 trillion naira, 1.1 trillion naira profits. You can read more of that story on the front page and also inside the paper. We want 30% trade in Africans facilitated by Access Holdings. You can find that story on page 12. And Afenifere say resurgence of terrorism after 2023 polls worrying, with the rider president to launch network against crime in Gulf of Guinea. And then we have leaves for Accra today to attend Maritime Security Summit. You can find that story on the front page and on page 10. The big story coming from Tinubu, Disregard rumor about my health. I'm refreshed and ready for tax ahead. With the rider, Nigerians are glad to see you back and fit, says Baru. APC to suspend Amechi's ex-chief of staff and others over anti-party activities. We have a picture story here where we can see a co-electricity distribution company visit Sanwo-Olu. You can actually see him in the middle together with the members of the company. And on Enugu, Governor-elect Mba names Chiko Abba Oyi Nibo, 60 others in transition committee. You can find that story on page 33, and that's all in this day newspaper.
On daily assets, AKK gas pipeline project near 70% completion. This is coming from NNPCL. And the big story, Sudan crisis. Air Peace offers free evacuation of Nigerians. NEMA plans movement of 2,000 Nigerians today. Nigerian students living in worse conditions. This is coming from NANS. Marks exodus of foreigners as fighting rages. Tinubu return says, I'm hale, hearty, ready for tax ahead. You can find the details inside the paper on page 2. Plateau police uncover hoodlums plot to forcefully enter state assembly. ISWAP fighters flee as troops repel attack in Sambisa forest. Buhari attends Gulf of Guinea summit in Ghana. 222.5 million Nigerians use telephones. This is a report coming from the NBS. You can find the details on page 15. At the downside of the paper, Kogi monarch dies in kidnappers' custody. The details can be found on page 4. And that's all the news on Daily Asset.
On Blueprint newspaper, on appointment, outgoing APC governors, party chieftains and other intensify lobby. With the rider, lobbyists resort to players, pay publicity and propaganda, and we have Ibokwe doubt exclusion of the Southeast from transition committee. Tinubu returns for May 29 inauguration, says I'm healthy for the tax ahead. Nigerians happy to see him back, coming from Baru, which you can find on page 6 of the Blueprint newspaper. And on Sudan crisis, federal government mulls Egypt support to rescue the 5,500 Nigerians. With the rider following the story, Air Peace offered to evacuate Nigerians. UK troops fly in from Britain's Sudanese fighters fight at France. Qatar rescue teams. You can find that story on the front page and more inside the paper. And on 2023 census, our server intact, ready for deployment, coming from the NBC. And FCT is saying 3 feared killed in Bagi native Hausa community clash in Gwarimpa. You can find that story inside the paper. Kogi monarch dies in kidnappers' den, which is sad. You can find more of that story too inside the paper. LASMA rescues accident victims, recover 100 used baby diapers. You can find that story on page 9. And still coming from Enugu, man strangles buries friend in shadow grave. Buhari's quest to birth national carrier suffers setback. You can find that on page 23. And on failed transition, customers complain to bank increased by over 50% of 2022. Picture story, we can see the supporters of Tinubu welcoming him back home after being, spending about 34 days outside the country. And that's all on the Blueprint newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, Buhari to attend Gulf of Guinea summit in Accra today. Gowon should stray away from Southeast, Simon Ekpa warns. We are ready to evacuate Nigerians from Sudan, Air Peace boss. You can find the details inside the paper. 171 Juventus fans banned from stadium over Lukaku's racist chants. The details can be found on page 17. NNPCL spends $1 billion so far on AKK gas pipeline project. This is coming from Kiari. It has purely 100% Nigerian workers. Abuja Kaduna power plant in earnest. I am ready for the tax ahead, Tinubu reassures. Excitement trace President-elect return after 34 days abroad. No serious leader will go unrest. This is coming from Peter Obi, and you can find the details inside the paper. 222.5 million Nigerians use telephone, a report from MBS. Currency outside banks of above 843 billion naira. This is a report coming from the CBN. 2 die as crisis rocks Ikara Akoko. The details can be found on page 4. At the downside of the paper, gunmen abduct population census official and have made a demand. You can find the details on page 10. And we have a picture story that says Tinubu arrives, and that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, we will deliver on Renew Hope agenda, Tinubu affirms, with the writer saying, I'm strong, very strong. Rosin, welcome for president-elect. You can find the story inside the paper. And we have what the story says, AKK pipeline to boost power with 3,600 megawatts. With the writer NMPCL invest $1.1 billion. You can find the story on page 4. How APC will zone Senate and House top posts. Religion voting pattern key. You can find more of that story on page 5. Why we are embracing private partners by NDDC. Lagos to roll out blueprint on transportation. You can find both story on page 6 and 26. And we have 2,800 Nigerians expected today from Sudan. And then we have student embassy official top list. These are the people that will be coming in first out of the 5,500 Nigerians that are in Sudan. And we have Enugu governor-elect named 64 transition council members. You can find a story on page 6. Other story here, we have Igbo leaders urge Awuya lead Ohaneze to align with Tinubu. You can find that story on page 6. We still have the picture story showing the president-elect coming back home, and that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On Daily Independent, air peace to evacuate stranded Nigerians for free from war-torn Sudan. Missing 149 million barrels of crude oil. CNPP wants independent inquiry, says Buhari can't probe self. And the big story on Daily Independent, AON, others move to block AOC issuance to Nigeria Air. $1.1 billion expended so far on AKK gas pipeline project. This is coming from NNPC. Muslims in Akwa eulogize about I take that story again. Muslims in Akwa eulogize Obi, says allegations against him false. The details can be found on page 29. Nimet tackles NLSRC over unauthorized lightning advisory. You can find the details on page 29. 1 dead, several injured as Abuja natives Hausa clash. Population Commission assures Nigerians of severe Delta safety. The details of that story can be found on page 6. Gunmen kidnapped Bielsa rep at NPC. Forget rumor mill Armstrong poised for the tax ahead. This is coming from Tinubu. At the downside of the paper, Buhari to attend Gulf of Guinea summit in Accra today. The details can be found on page 6. And that's all the news on Daily Independent.
On the Punch newspaper, the big story, Tinubu return after 34 days, dismisses ill health rumors. With the writer, ignore ill health rumors. I would assemble strong team and hit the ground running. Coming from the president-elect. President-elect APC National Working Committee to meet lawmakers-elect over the National Assembly leadership. And we know it's very important to this present administration, where we have a little of the detail of that story that said the president-elect Bola Tinubu on Monday returned to the country after holidaying in Paris, France for 34 days. Tinubu, who was accompanied by his wife Remy and son Sheyi, arrived at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport at 4:40 p.m. to a rousing welcome by all Progressive Congress governors, National Assembly leaders, and scores of party loyalists. The ex-Lagos State Governor departed the country on March 31st, a few weeks after he was declared the winner of the presidential election. According to a statement by his media aide, Tunde Rahman, the trip would enable Tinubu to rest and planned his transition program ahead of his inauguration on May 29th. So you can grab the Punch newspaper, read more detail of that story. Other stories still on the Punch newspaper we have on Sudan conflict. Ethiopia blocked fleeing Nigerian student. Fraction agreed 42 hours ceasefire. With the writer following that story, federal government knocks students for ignoring warning against self-evacuation. You can find more of that on page 8. Of course, you won't blame the student with all that is happening. You definitely have to look for a way to survive. But I hope that they listen to warnings next time. And we have on the Northern Governors Forum hold validatory session for 17 outgoing governors. You can find that story on page 9. Downside of the paper, Ondo farmers raised the alarm over herdsmen attack. We have to read more of that on page 5. It's alarming because immediately after the election, we're seeing that there's a rise in insecurity in various states. Here we're seeing Ondo. We also heard in Plateau State recently on Sunday there was an attack, and then it's quite unfortunate that one of my neighbors was part of the guys that were killed during that. It's quite sad at the time where a lot of people are going through a lot, and then we're seeing insecurity. Even though they tend to be different versions of the story, others are saying it was just a clash in the community. Others are saying that there were some unknown gunmen, as usual, that actually came there and begin to ask questions. Why are they unknown? Are they spirit? These are human beings, and we are supposed to know where they are. On the paper, we saw even the issue on Sambisa Forest, where a lot is happening over there. And I just hope that with the the president-elect resting, I hope that while he was resting, he actually has his plan, his blueprint on what he intends to do. So we'll just keep our hopes alive and just hope that everything will be done. We saw that right now, as Naira is now in circulation, kidnappers are beginning to demand for ransom left, right, and center. So we hope all of these things will be controlled, will be managed, and it doesn't get out of hand before we do something about it. So we just hope the right thing is done at the end of the day. Other stories still on the Punch newspaper on Lagos Stadium, from West African best to national shame. We have to find why that is the reverse when we add the West African best and now in shame. Read more of that story on page 3. And we have 8 states got zero investment in 4 years. This is a report which you can find on page 24. And that's all of the Punch newspaper. But before we go further, we would like to go on a break, led you through the stories, as we are having about 2,800 Nigerian students that will be coming back into the country from Sudan. Also, we've seen that the president-elect is back into the country after resting for about 34 days in company of his wife and his son. And then also a lot of stories actually, on the papers this morning. So when we come back from the break, we'll open the phone lines and also read your comments as they drop on our Facebook or YouTube channel. Please do not go anywhere. We'll be right back after the break. Thanks for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies on Echo Television, where we keep you up to date with what is happening from our Nigerian newspaper. Before we went on the break, we were giving you some highlight on what is happening on the paper. The president-elect is back into the country after spending about 34 days, in Paris, France. And then also we've seen that a lot is happening. About 2,800 Nigerian students will be coming back into the country, while we still have more there as the Nigerian government look into how they can bring the rest of them back home. We've seen other stories, the issue of propaganda on the Senate president seat, a lot that the president-elect actually have to, work with. These are many other stories that were on the paper. So our phone numbers are open at this moment. Our phone numbers are displayed on your screen. Please do well to call us on any story that is of interest to you. And do remember to turn down the volume of your TV set when you call us. Please, let's be civil with our language. Nigeria belongs to all of us, so let us speak, positively concerning issues that are in the country, no matter how, emotional we get about things that are happening in the country. I still have Rachel Tanzer with me in the studio. Thanks, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, before we open the phone lines, we will just continue with the newspaper.
Yes. On Nigerian Tribune, gunmen attack 5 communities in Plateau, 12 killed. NPCL projects 3,650 megawatts from Ajakuta Kaduna Kano gas pipeline project. Project gulps $1.1 billion near 70% completion. National Assembly leadership zoning on the cards as Tinubu returns. I'm strong, ready for tax ahead, he says. New Dawn Group emerges in Rep Speaker race. The details can be found on pages 15 and 16. Panic in Abuja as communal clash claims won. Youth bury man alive in Benue over claims he used thunder to kill own son. The details can be found on page 27. Accident claims one. Latma arrests victim with over 100 used children diapers. The details can be found on page 26. Kogi monarch dies in kidnapper's den. Still on the Sudan evacuation, over 2,000 Nigerians via Cairo begins today, and you can find the details on page 4, and this is coming from NEMA. We have Nigerian female students weep uncontrollably as war escalates. It's pathetic. Nigerians rushing to Sudan for university education. A statement coming from ASU. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
Right, let's take a look at the New Telegraph newspaper, where we have collection costs. Federal government pay revenue generating agency 82.30 billion naira. You can find more of that story inside the paper. Coming from MBS, kerosene price rises by 102.37% to 1,141 naira in 1 year. You can find detail of that story on page 26. We have NMPCL has spent over $1.1 billion on Ajakuta Kaduna Kano gas pipeline projects. Coming from Ibuyi, South Umahi Okori renew rivalry. You can find that on page 11 and 29. And on human trafficking, NAPTEC rescue conviction of 599 offenders since 2004. Detail found on page 29. IGP direct expedite probe of Adamawa wreck. You can find that on page 3 and 5. The big story on the 10th Assembly, South-South Northwest to produce Senate President and Speaker as APC concludes zoning arrangements. And we have not withdraw from race coming from Sani Musa. President-elect returns after 4 weeks vacation, says he's ready for the tax ahead. You can find that on page 2 and 26. And on the census, we have server intact ready for deployment coming from the NBC, with the rider only accurate data would justify the budget. You can find more of that on page 17 and 28. Northern Governors Forum hold validatory meeting for outgoing governors. And we have why government is unwilling to end the killing in South Kaduna. You'll find more of that on page 9. Landowners obtain warrant of possession against Nigerian army, with detail on page 28. As battle ranges in Sudan, air peace offered to evacuate trapped Nigerians. And we have detail of that on page 2, 5, and 8. Don't issue license to Nigerian Air, aggrieved airlines warn NCAA. Visa-free Africa agenda faces obstacle, hunt AU and SATM. You can find that on page 4, 21, and 22. We have a study that says activity snacking can help improve blood sugar levels. You read more of that study on page 6, and that's all the New Telegraph newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, International Day, Nigerians spend 2.04 trillion naira yearly on malaria prevention and treatment. You can find the details on page 6. Afenifere tackles Buhari over resurgence of terrorism, plea for forgiveness. Pharmacists kick over exclusion from 40% pay rise for workers, make demands. You can find the details on page 5. 161,272 financial threats blocked in Nigeria last year. Worries over HND BSc bill as Buhari exits near. After 34 days rest overseas, Tinubu affirms readiness for tax ahead. And at the downside of the paper, on Sudan crisis, airline offers free flight as Northern Coalition condemns delay in evacuation. The details can be found on page 3, and that's all the news on the Guardian newspaper.
On the leadership newspaper, coming from FCT, clash deaths reported, cars destroyed. You can find that story on page 4. And we have after loses, Amcon sells NG Eagle to unnamed investors. You can find that on page 18. The other story here we have says NNPCL releases $1.1 billion for AKK gas pipeline project. And we have Zulum Buni, top race for Governors Forum chairman, and you can find that on page 7. The big story, Tinubu dispel rumor of ill health, says I'm ready to serve. Return to a rousing welcome after 1 month vacation in France. Surround yourself with competent, like-minded people. You can find more of that story on page 4. Benue youths bury 2 suspected wizards alive. You find more of that story on page 10. And on Sudan, countries evacuate citizens amid unsteady ceasefire. 77% of Nigerian women use bleaching cream, says NAFDAC. You find more of that story on page 11, and that's all on Leadership newspaper.
On the Vanguard newspaper, CBN defends forex ban on stockfish importation. 40% pay rise, varsity workers on warpath with federal government over exclusion. I have no reason to take rest because of election. This is coming from Peter Obi. You can find the details on page 11. Sean rumors Armstrong, Tinubu says on arrival from France. Ads have rested, refreshed, ready for tax ahead. Party leaders to meet soon on zoning of offices. And this is from a source. You can read more on page 5. And on electricity, new bill in House of Reps threatens 10 billion naira investment. 2 more Chibok schoolgirls rescued from Sambisa forest. You can find the details on page 6. 3 killed in Bagi Hausa youths clash in Abuja. Abducted Kogi monarch dies in kidnappers' den. Again, court dashes Nigeria's air hope of flying. You can find the details on page 9. We have a sports column that says Osimhen, Napoli just 4 points from being crowned Serie A champions. The details can be found on page 29. We have Africa must vaccinate 33 million children to meet global target. This is from World Health Organization concerning immunization, and you can find the details on page 20. And that's all the news on the Vanguard newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, Zenith Bank PAT dips by 8.4%. You can find that on page 5. President-elect Tinubu returned after 1 month in France. And on the issue of the FCT clash, police moved to calm Hausa Bagi communities. You can also find that on page 3. And on Sudan crisis, Nigerians allege hostilities as Ethiopia demand entry visa. With the rider, federal government plan evacuation to Egypt, Air Peace offers help. Court bars NCAA from issuing AOC to Nigerian Air. And we also have federal government review gas tariff to attract investors in midstream business. We still have the picture story showing the president-elect back to the country, and that's all on Daily Times.
On Daily Sun newspaper, 2023 UTME begins today. 1.5 million candidates to write in 708 centers. Osmani Yare opens up on Tinubu, Alpha Conde, and Guinea. Throws light on president-elect's link with Guinea. You can find the details on page 6. Gunmen killed 7 in Plateau as herdsmen militia kill 4 mourners in Benue. Enugu Governor-elect Umba names Choke, Abba, Onya, Nebo, and 60 others for transition committee. Petrol price increased by 42.63% a liter in 1 year, coming from the NBS. Governors hold valedictory meeting for 17 outgoing members. Imo Guba State joined parliament endorsed Uzodinma. The details can be found on page 26. Tinubu returns after 34 days abroad. Nigerians telephone users hit 222.5 million. You can find the details on page 27, and that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, Niger Delta stakeholders expert gather from NDDC PP Summit. You can find that story inside the paper. Our commitment to Nigeria's decade of gas mastery unwavering, coming from Satellite Energy. On maritime security, Buhari to attend summit of Gulf of Guinea, head of state government in Ghana. You can find that story inside the paper. The big story, May 29. I'm strong, ready for tax, coming from Tinubu. Debunks speculation of ill health. Says working on plan. I take that right again. Says working on plan, and he has consultation for choice of appointment. Political lobbying for appointment. National Assembly leadership shoots up. You can find the story on page 2. We have picture stories here actually showing the governor of Lagos State on one part, and there we still have another picture story on the other part. So you do well to get Nigerian News Direct and read more detail of any story that captures your interest.
On Business Day newspaper, Buhari's 22.7 trillion naira debt conversion plan stuck in limbo. Nigeria on curbs of debt crisis, runs FDC. Value stocks seen shielding investors from inflation risks. Nigeria misses out as rivals lock in long-term LNG contracts. Nigeria's declining fertility rate contradicts population estimate, and you can find the details on page 3. And that's all the news on Business Day.
All right, let's take our sport lovers to the Punch Sport Extract, where we have the big one saying the forgotten man, Samuel Kalu in football wilderness since moved to Welford in 2022. You can read more of that story inside the paper. We have United lead Chelsea in race for Osimhen, and we have EFL Best Player Award thrills upon. We have Liverpool rivalry Madrid for Chugos Eze, and we have Owobi wants Champions League football. We have Chelsea to rekindle Neymar interest, and then we also have other, very interesting capturing stories on the front page of the Punch Sport Extra. So for sport lovers, you can do well to grab the, the Punch Sport Extra and read more stories that are of interest to you. And that's how far we can go on the program this morning. And thank you so much, Richard, for doing this with me. Thank you to our crew members. Thank you to the Echo Executive. Thank you to everybody. And before we leave you, just do remember to take care of yourself as we celebrate the World Malaria Day. Keep your environment clean. Do all you can to make sure you stay away from anything dirty or anything that will trigger you. And do make sure you are always at home at good time to avoid being harassed or being, attacked by anybody. Do have a blessed day ahead. Bye for now.